Welcome to Sunny's Mindset Lab podcast. Today we're exploring The 4-Hour Workweek with its author, Timothy Ferriss. This book challenges conventional ideas about work, time, and retirement, and introduces a radically different way of designing life around freedom and effectiveness. Tim, thank you for joining us. I want to start with the quote you opened the book with, from Oscar Wilde. "Anyone who lives within their means suffers from a lack of imagination." That's a pretty provocative way to begin. What's the message you're sending there?
Thank you, Sunny. It's a pleasure to be here. That quote really sets the stage. It's not about encouraging financial irresponsibility. It's about challenging the default settings that we all accept without question. The 9-to-5 grind, the idea that you have to wait until you're 65 to really start living. The book is really a call to be creatively ambitious with the design of your life, to focus on what's possible rather than just what's conventional.
That makes sense. It's about a bigger kind of wealth. To help us understand this philosophy, it looks like you've broken it down into 4 key concepts. We'll start by defining this group you call the new rich. Then, we'll talk about conquering the fear that holds people back. After that, we'll dive into the actionable blueprint, the deal framework. And finally, we'll explore what you call the real endgame, what to do with all this newfound freedom.
Exactly. It's a sequential process. Each step builds on the last one.
Great. So let's start with Section 1, the new rich. When most people hear the word rich, they immediately think of millionaires with huge bank accounts. But that's not what you're talking about, is it? Not at all. The new rich have abandoned the traditional model of slaving away for 40 years just to enjoy a brief retirement. For them, wealth isn't about the number in their bank account. It's about creating lifestyles of freedom in the present. They value time and mobility above all else, which allows them to have millionaire experiences without necessarily having $1 million. So you're really drawing a sharp contrast here between what you call the deferred life plan and the lifestyle of the new rich. It seems like a fundamental shift in how we even define wealth.
It is. The old goal was to work for yourself, to climb a ladder, to accumulate a big pile of cash. The new goal is to have systems and other people work for you, so you can make money and have the time to enjoy it. It's a complete pivot away from focusing on absolute income, how much you make in a year, to something far more valuable.
And that more valuable thing is what you call relative income. Can you break that down for us? Why is this the true currency? Relative income is about looking at both the money you make and the time it takes to make it. Let me give you an example. Imagine 2 people. Person A makes $100,000 a year, but they work 80 hours a week and they're stressed out. Person B makes $50,000 a year, but only works 10 hours a week from anywhere in the world. Who's truly richer? In relative terms, it's person B without a doubt. They have a higher hourly income, and more importantly, they have the time to actually live their life. Time is our most non-renewable asset. True wealth is the freedom to choose how you spend. That's a powerful way to look at it. But, of course, the idea of leaving a stable job, even when you don't love, is absolutely terrifying for most people. It seems that fear is the biggest hurdle. It's the single biggest obstacle by far. We get paralyzed by this vague anxiety of what if everything goes wrong? But we never stop to actually define what everything is. So I developed a practical exercise I call fear setting. The goal is to make that fear tangible, to get it out of your head and onto paper so you can actually manage it. And it all seems to start with this one simple but powerful question. What is the absolute worst-case scenario? Why is asking this question so effective? Because when our fears are just these undefined monsters in our head, they have infinite power over us. The moment you write down the absolute worst possible outcome, you give it shape, you put a box around it. And you almost always realize that the worst-case scenario isn't the life-ending catastrophe you've built it up to be. It's usually something temporary and reversible. So you have a 3-step process for this. Could you walk us through that? How does it work in practice?
Sure. Step 1 is to define the nightmare. You list out every terrible thing that could happen if you take that leap. Then, you rate the permanent impact of each of those on a scale of 1 to 10. You'll find most are a 2 or a 3. Step 2 is prevent and repair. You brainstorm ways to prevent the worst outcomes and, more importantly, what you could do to get back on track if they did happen. How could you get your old job back or a similar one? You realize you have a safety net. And finally, step 3 is to define the benefits. You list all the amazing things that could happen if you succeed, even partially. When you weigh a temporary, manageable downside against a life-changing upside, the decision becomes much, much clearer. Often the biggest risk is inaction.
That makes so much sense. Quantifying the risk makes it less scary. So once you've managed the fear, you provide a really structured, actionable framework called DEAL. What does that stand for? DEAL is the step-by-step blueprint for redesigning your life. It stands for D for definition, E for elimination, A for automation, and L for liberation. It's the process for moving from being overworked and tied to one location to having freedom of both time and mobility. Let's start with D for definition. You introduce a specific exercise called dreamlining. How is this different from just, setting goals? It's much more concrete. Vague goals like I want to travel more are useless because they aren't actionable. Dreamlining forces you to get specific. You list exactly what you want to have, be, and do in the next 6 to 12 months. But here's the critical step. You calculate the actual monthly cost of making those dreams a reality. You don't just say, I want to learn tango in Buenos Aires. You research the flight, the apartment, the lessons, and you put a real dollar amount on it. This turns a vague fantasy into a concrete financial target with a clear timeline. Okay, so you've defined your target. Next up is E for elimination. The first principle here is the 80-20 rule, or the Pareto principle. Can you explain how you use this to change your own business? Absolutely. I analyzed my business and found that just 5 of my 120 wholesale customers were generating about 95% of my revenue. The other 115 were causing almost all of my headaches and stress. So I made the terrifying decision to fire the problematic ones. It took a lot of courage, but almost overnight, my happiness skyrocketed. I had more free time, and my profits actually went up because I could focus on my best clients. Elimination isn't about doing less. It's about ruthlessly focusing only on the few things that produce the most value. The other key principle of elimination you talk about is Parkinson's law. What is that, and how do we fight against it? Parkinson's law basically states that if you give yourself a week to complete a 2-hour task, that task will magically swell in importance and complexity to fill the entire week. We've all experienced this. The solution is to impose short, aggressive deadlines on yourself. Instead of giving yourself all day to write a report, give yourself 90 minutes. This forces you to focus only on the essential actions. It's about creating focus through constraints. So once you've eliminated the waste and freed up your time and focus, we get to A for automation. You introduce this concept of building a muse. What exactly is a muse, and how is it different from just starting a regular small business?
That's a crucial distinction. A muse is a business that is specifically designed from the very beginning to generate cash flow without your daily involvement. The goal is not to create another job for yourself, which is what most entrepreneurs do. The goal is to create an automated source of income that funds your ideal lifestyle. The business serves you. You don't serve the business.
The process you outline for building a muse seems a bit counterintuitive, especially the last step. Can you walk us through it?
It is. First, you pick a niche market that you're a part of or understand deeply. Second, you brainstorm a simple product for that market, something informational or easy to produce, ideally priced between $50 and $200 to maximize profit per customer. But the third step is the most important. Test before you invest. Before you spend a dime on manufacturing or inventory, you create a simple 1 to 3 page website for the product and run a small Google AdWords campaign. This micro-test validates whether people will actually pull out their credit cards and buy it. It prevents you from wasting months or years on a bad idea.
So once you have a validated product, the key is to outsource all the operations. We're looking at a sample breakdown here, and we can see expenses for things like fulfillment centers and call centers. Even after all those costs, there's a significant profit margin left over.
Is the main takeaway here that this profit is being generated without your personal time being involved?
Exactly right. You become the owner who looks at the dashboard, not the operator who's packing boxes or answering phones. The goal is automated cash flow. You build a system that runs on its own, and that's what buys your freedom. This seems like a perfect example of automation from your own story. You say, I sent one single email that immediately turned 200 email per day into fewer than 20 email per week. That's a staggering drop. What was in that email? I was drowning in emails from my customer service team asking for my approval on tiny issues. So I sent out a single email with a new policy. If a problem costs less than $100 to fix, just fix it. Don't ask me, solve the customer's problem. That one decision empowered my team, made customers happier, and, as the quote says, my email volume dropped by more than 90%. It's a great lesson that automation isn't just about technology. It's also about rules, trust, and empowerment. So we've defined our goals, eliminated the non-essential, and automated our income. This brings us to the final letter in the DEAL framework, L for liberation. What does this endgame look like? Liberation is about using that newfound freedom to become location independent. It's about escaping the 9 to 5, not just in terms of hours worked, but in terms of physical location. The goal is to architect your life and your work so that it can be done from anywhere in the world, giving you ultimate mobility. And this is where you introduce the concept of mini retirements. That sounds a lot better than a 2-week vacation. What's the difference? A huge difference. A vacation is a short escape from your life. A mini retirement is a lifestyle relocation. You're not escaping your life, you're moving it somewhere else for 1, 3, or even 6 months to fully immerse yourself in something. Learning a language in Spain, studying martial arts in Japan, or whatever your dream is. And what surprises most people is that living abroad for months can often be far cheaper than staying home. It's about distributing retirement throughout your life instead of saving it all for the... That's an incredible vision for entrepreneurs. But what about people who are in a traditional 9-to-5 job right now? You have a very tactical script for them to negotiate remote work. How does that work? It's a gradual, strategic process. You don't just walk in and demand to work from home. Step 1 is to increase your value to the company. Become so good they can't afford to lose you. Step 2 is to prove you're more productive remotely. The tactic I suggest is to call in sick, but then deliver an incredible amount of work from home, leaving a clear email trail. This demonstrates your output is higher outside the office. Then, step 3 is to propose a trial run. Ask to work from home 1 day a week. If that goes well, expand it to 2, and so on. You make it a win-win for the company. So, after all this work, defining, eliminating, automating, liberating, you have freedom. But that brings up maybe the most important question of all. Now what? You call this final challenge filling the void. Yes, and this is critical. The goal of the 4-hour workweek is not to sit on a beach and do nothing all day. That kind of idleness becomes its own form of poison very quickly. When you remove work, you create a vacuum. If you don't proactively fill that void with meaningful pursuits, you'll feel aimless and probably just invent more work for yourself to feel busy again. So what are the right things to fill that void with? What's the purpose of all this freedom? The purpose is to reinvest your time into things that provide genuine fulfillment. I argue that the 2 main components of a truly rich life are continuous learning and service. Use your newfound time to master that skill you've always dreamed of, or learn that language you've always wanted to speak. And just as importantly, find a way to serve others, to do something that improves life beyond your own. The ultimate point is to use your freedom to live more fully and to make a unique contribution on your own terms. That brings everything full circle. You include this quote from Henry David Thoreau. A man is rich in proportion to the number of things he can afford to let alone. That feels like the perfect summary of this entire philosophy. It really is. True wealth isn't about accumulation, it's about freedom. It's the freedom from being a slave to your possessions, to a desk, or to meaningless work. The more obligations, clutter, and anxiety you can afford to let go of, the richer you become in the things that truly matter, your time, your mobility, and your options in life. Tim, thank you for walking us through the 4-hour workweek. This conversation gives our listeners a clearer way to rethink work, time, and how they design their lives. We'll leave our audience with the final provocative question you pose in the book. If you had total freedom over your time and location, what would you do differently starting tomorrow?
Thank you, Sunny. I hope these ideas help people question assumptions and build lives that align more closely with their values.
This has been Sunny's Mindset Lab. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode.